have made it. There we go. We got this going. That way we can upload it later for everyone to watch because I think this is a very hot topic for a lot of veterans out there. Not really sure what salary negotiation looks like, feels like, and you're generally terrified of it. Don't be, I promise. It is far more and like it's more fun than it looks, believe it or not. We will wait till more folks get in here while I open things up. Curiosity, how many people have been through a salary negotiation yet? Do like the virtual raise of hands or real hands? Doesn't matter. Oh, thank you, Laura. Good, I'm glad. Is it
Hey,
easy,
Curtis.
harder than it looks? Go ahead.
I was gonna ask, like, one thing, could you potentially cover like how to negotiate equity?
Oh, yeah.
Like I know like Shift has a lot of like startup type companies. So like salary and bonuses are like those are like easy numbers to comprehend, right? Like you offer 85, I say I'm worth 90, and they're like, okay, we can do that. Or they say 15%, I say 20%. Whereas equity is more abstract of like, yeah, no, like you're offering me 500,000 shares. What exactly does that mean? Can it be diluted, right? To where like it's 500,000 shares today, whereas tomorrow those 500,000 shares get diluted because they release a new series of funding and it's like, yeah, even the secretary down the hall is getting 500,000 and I'm the, chief technology officer.
Yeah, we actually have Laura Leach, who's one of these windows around me. Um, Actually has a little calculator that we can work on. Yeah, she's over here doing this. Actually, I'll pin her. Well, no, if I pin her, then the recording is just you, and it makes people feel uncomfortable watching it. So we'll just talk a bunch, and that'll work.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's built in. But it looks like only a handful. Yeah, it's very nerve-wracking. I promise it's I won't say it's easier than it looks, but once you take the right perspective and go about it that way, it becomes far less intimidating. And it can be fun at times. But we're about 5 minutes past, and I know I only have an hour tonight, so let me get my screen share up. Yes, there are slides. No, we're not going to completely 100% go off of them. And once I start presenting, we'll be good to go. I think I'd be prepared. Never. Okay. There we go. Now you all disappeared. Well, I fixed that. Hello, welcome, and thank you for coming. Week 4 of the Communicating Your Value series. Hopefully you found a lot of value in this cohort so far to date. I believe there is only one track that still has a session tomorrow, and then we have our Friday session with, I can never remember the name of the company. Christy, do you have it off the top of your head who Friday is with?
New Front. Mike Brown is the COO at New Front Insurance.
So if you are, if you don't have that invite, let me know. If you do, I encourage you to come. Great partner, relatively new to us, so definitely something worth exploring, figuring out. They are hiring, so show on up. But before then, we will go through our salary negotiation workshop. So to give you an idea of what to expect for the workshop, Laura Leach is going to be our guest speaker. She is a senior career coach, runs her own company. We just hit it off really well in career coaching for another session. So I asked her to come speak to me or speak to this cohort about salary negotiation because it's near and dear to her heart. We see a lot of on the same perspective, and I'm happy to have her. But we'll be going through the topics relatively in this order of your budget, the approach, comp packages, negotiation, etiquette, and then open it up at the end for Q&A for you guys. And yes, the two foxes are looking like they're fighting because I feel like that's kind of the impression that most people get when they think of salary negotiations. It's just this argument that you get into and it's me versus you or us versus them. It really, really isn't. But Laura, I said talk briefly about how we met, but you want to go more in depth of who you are, where you come from, and why you're really, really good at this?
So my name is Laura Leach, and I am the founder and president of Meredith Consulting. I was a recruiter for a little over 20 something years, and started off in technology and infrastructure, moved into digital marketing, and kind of ended my career somewhere around the marketing telecom stack. So I've been here in California. Most of my career has been in the Bay Area, in the Silicon Valley, and now kind of nationwide as a coach. Some of the areas that I think are really important to think about is that we have to advocate for ourselves. And once we understand what our worth is, what the scope of the job is, then we can start kind of putting some of those pieces together. And we'll talk about those today. And then I want to really open it up for any questions. I talk really fast, so forgive me, tell me to slow down and stop if I go too fast. And yes, I still use my hands as if like we're in front of each other. I don't use, I still wave at the end, like, bye. I don't know why. I haven't gotten past that, but yeah, and I'm open up to any questions. You'll have my contact information. So if anyone has any other questions about my background, I'm happy to share.
Awesome. Thank you for the intro, Laura. And I will say that I also wave goodbye at the end, even when my camera's off. I found myself doing that earlier today. For the cohort, the format of this is actually, Laura and I are just going to have a conversation. We want to see your questions, drop in the chat. Feel free to raise your hand, interrupt at any time. We're here for you. We have a bunch of different topics that we want to cover, but we'll make sure that we cover what is on your mind, your burning questions. So again, drop it in the chat. Christy, if anything comes up in the chat that's worth bringing up, let us know that we don't see. But we will start off with question number 1 from Desiree of what is your take on pineapple on pizza?
Is that to me?
Yeah.
Oh no. I know. I don't know how I feel about pineapple on pizza. So I don't really know how I feel about it. I'm indifferent.
All good. That was my take at first too. But to get things going, the first place that I like to start off a salary negotiation topic is you have to know your budget. This part is like very simple, straightforward. If you have to sit down and figure out what your bills are, what your expenses are, what you need to survive. This is your baseline number, especially since are you open to relocation? Laura, you live in San Francisco. I mean,
yeah. So I think I think when it comes to like figuring out what your budget is, there's also one other piece to think about too, and that is what is your what's your overhead, right? So what is the minimum amount that you need to survive? And also, you need to pad that, right? So you also you want to get out of that working from paycheck to paycheck. So you have that kind of padded in there. Relocation, because of the pandemic, a lot of the Bay Area companies are continuing to pay Bay Area wages, but there's a lot of scuttlebutt about how that is actually going to land at the end of this pandemic. So some companies are saying that they're going to do salary adjustments for relocation, and yet there's other companies that are giving bonuses to relocate somewhere else. So that's kind of industry. It's different in different industries. It's different within different companies, and you'll have to go and kind of figure out where they've landed with their salary and cost of living based off of any kind of relocation. But when we talk about our floor, I also want you to think about, if you can think strategically about 1 or 2 jobs out, right? Because I always like to think about, if I want to be at this level, in 5 years, how do I back myself into it? And knowing that we only get a certain increase on a yearly basis, we really want to make sure that we're thinking ahead for the bigger piece of our career and how we're going to grow that trajectory. I tell people quite often that the only time that you're going to make more money is when you go work for someone else, right? You only get a little tiny increase here and there. So you want to make sure that when you're coming out of the gate thinking, okay, what is this job worth? And we'll go into all of this, but thinking about where do I your budget and your overhead, but also where do you want to be in, when people ask, where do you want to be in 5 years? In your head, you should be thinking, how much do I want to be making in 5 years and how can I back into it? Because maybe out of the gate, I'm not going to get there. So just something else to kind of think about when we're putting together our overhead and our budget.
Absolutely. And I see a couple questions coming in the chat. Some of them we'll touch on a little bit later, but Andrew asking, like, how do you negotiate salary in a new location, like moving from North Carolina to New York? I'll give you my take, and then Laura, I'd love to hear what you think of. It's going to be inherently built in. A lot of the salary negotiation, or a lot of the salary offers or compensation offers that you're going to receive are based off of locations. So if you're making like a certain amount in South Carolina and you're moving to New York, you can almost expect to see those numbers jump on their own. But sometimes you do have to advocate for yourself, and you're saying like, hey, I'm coming from North Carolina and moving to New York, so this is generally where I'm thinking. That's where your research comes in. But Laura, you have any thoughts on that?
Same, I echo what you have to say, in that you need to do your research. You need to know what that market rate is for that environment. We're going to have a great takeaway sheet that we put together that has a ton of resources for you. But the more you educate yourself about what the market rate is for that particular region, the more you'll be able to come to the table with the initial, even like how, the initial kind of conversation around salary negotiation or even salary expectations.
Sure. Just like a quick caveat off of that, like, so kind of what I'm seeing is like, I'll say like my salary is XYZ here, and based off of cost of living, in order to just stay the same, I need to be at this level. And then I would expect for this particular role to be higher than that, just, minimum of like, hey, to keep it at that, to like just maintain, right, due to the cost of living factors. But then I guess I'm finding a lot of times like potentially the companies, the wage difference isn't necessarily making up that gap, right? Like if cost of living is 10% different, the salary range is only 5% different. Like they're making their money go a little further in New York, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I've seen out there cost of living conversion calculators that I really like. So at least it'll say like, hey, you're making this here, you'll make this here, or what you can expect to, or what you would need to maintain that cost of living. So that'll give you at least a glimpse into what the adjustment would be to move. And then you can do like, oh, and then I'm kind of looking for maybe a 10, 15% increase on top of that. So that way, it's like, hey, I did some like a cost comparison for cost of living here. It would be this adjustment. And then on top of it, I'm actually looking for the next step in my career. There's a couple out there. I don't know if we have those in our research. You can Google them, like cost of living comparison.
Yeah.
They're great. Laura, anything to add?
Yeah, no, I think we can cover this, and I think it's going to come up in a next slide or two. It's the talk track in which you're kind of presenting yourself. So we can talk about this in one of the next next slides that are coming up.
You guys are like so far ahead of us. We got to start somewhere. Start with
yeah. I think we got to start with budget. So we'll talk about how do we present ourselves, right? And this is kind of what this is right here. And
yeah, I can kick this off. So
sure.
The approach of a lot of what we talked about in this section was myths that people have. So if anything, you should really start down here. Like these are 3 very straightforward things that people just, for some reason, they get wrong. The recruiter is not out to get you. They are not like, I'm going to get him for the lowest. That way I get to keep this much of the money. No, they're there to help you. They have put a lot of work into you by this point, and they are definitely rooting for you to succeed. And like, this is a conversation. Have that conversation with them. I think I say it in a slide in the future here. You are working together on the same problem. Both of you want you to work there, and both of you want you to work there at a reasonable and fair salary. So work with each other to make that happen. And when you shift that perspective, it becomes so much easier, and the conversation happens much more fluidly. And yeah, the recruiter is not out to get you. But I did, Laura, you had some really good thoughts about setting the tone at the beginning, and I wanted to hear more about that.
Sure, sure, sure. So we all get intimidated by like that salary question, right? And so when we understand what the range is or what the budget is for the role, then we can have a better conversation about what our needs are. But before I get into like that, I do want to say there are two different types of recruiters. There's a corporate recruiter and there's an agency recruiter. And corporate recruiters do have a fiduciary responsibility to the company to stay within a certain budget. Agency recruiters are like, are usually 100% commission. It's in their best interest to get you the biggest deal because then they get paid more. So the more you make, the more they make. So remember that about agency recruiters. They are not trying to grind you down. Literally, they make money on top of what you make, and so they get a percentage. So it's in their best interest to get you the biggest deal possible. A corporate recruiter, it does have that fiduciary responsibility. So they have to stay within their budget constraint. And the way that the budget constraints work is that there's a salary range. There's a minimum, a median, and a maximum, usually within a salary range. At most, mature companies have come up with these kind of salary bands, as we call them. So one of the things that you can ask right off the bat is, can you share with me what it is? Can you share with me the salary range for this role? So then I can get an idea of where I want to come in, what I'm looking for. So if I am, at let's say I'm at $100,000, right? And that's my minimum is 90. I mean, minimum is 90. I want to come in at 100 or 105. I want to tell them that, right? Because they're going to try to negotiate me down. They're always going to give me their minimum and their median, right? They're never going to give me their maximum because that's that playroom that they have to do the negotiation. We never want to give them our minimum because they'll try to get us lower. And this is where that frustration comes in because we are really honest and we'll tell people what our lowest is. Right? We just, because we're honest, we were like, yeah, I can't make less than this. And we literally mean that. And they know that. And then they'll go to the lowest, right? Because you said it and you said you're going to be okay with that, not intentionally. So I think what we have to remember is whatever that number was that we came up with our budget on the previous slide, we need to pad that so that we have negotiations, some room to negotiate on our end as well. So remember, there's always three numbers to play with in that budget. And we want to come in on the higher end, and they're always going to come in on the lower end, and you're going to meet happily in the middle somewhere.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I see a bunch of questions coming in here too. I think, Craig, I'm going to pick on you a little bit of, if the question is, if the offer is what you want, is it a bad move to not counter? Laura, I'll let you take this one.
Yeah, countering is expected with all companies. If you are in a revenue generating position, or if it is part of your job to work with vendors and negotiate contracts, or if it's in your job to that has anything to do with revenue generation, it is an example of what you can do. You are literally showing them in the negotiation process what your negotiation abilities are and how you could influence, how you can convince, how you come up with a good story, or a convincing story, or an argument, or whatever you want to call it, right? Hopefully it's not an argument, but you have done your homework and your research. So if you don't counter offer, you're going to get what you get, right? And when we want to counter offer, we always should. Do we want me to go into do we have a counter offer slide?
I think we do.
Okay.
We'll save this for a little bit, but
yeah, we'll save it for a little bit, the structure of the counter, but 100% the answer is yes. I think you should always counter with some kind of ask, and you only get one ask. So be prepared.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
It comes in on a future slide, but it's kind of weird if you don't. Like, think about if you were selling something online and you're like, oh, I have this thing, I bought it for 100. It's like, you know what? I'll sell it for like 80, and you're like, hey, somebody's like, I'll take it for 80, and you're like, could I have gotten more out of that? It's like, maybe I should ask for more. It feels weird when somebody takes the first offer. It really feels weird. So always negotiate, because if you don't, it's funny. But
Yeah.
I just wanted to put that in there. And then Jose, remind me to come back to your question of who makes the first offer. There's a lot of opinions out there. I have some, Laura has some, and it's a great thing to explore. But when it comes to the compensation package, this is another just kind of nuts and bolts information presenting slide. It is more than just your base salary. The base salary does get the most attention. It's usually the biggest number on the table. Something that I learned is your base salary may be offered annually, or it could be offered hourly. And the reason I put 2080 there, that is the number of work hours that are estimated for a year. So if you have an hourly number and you want to convert it to an annual number, multiply your hourly rate by 2080 or 2000 if you want to account for holidays, and that will get you in the ballpark. A lot of people get caught off guard and they're like, oh, it's going to be $70 an hour. What does that mean? 2080 is the magic number, or just think 2000 will be good to go. And yeah, they expect you to. Other things, bonus, commission, equity, 401k, just some various questions to ask. This is in the handout that we're going to give you afterwards. Insurance, PTO, extras, they will typically give you a list of things to look through. But honestly, the last one here to pay attention to, anything you can think of is on the table, believe it or not. There are tons of things out there right now. Laura, did you have anything to add here, or any specific stories to cover?
Yeah. I mean, you cover them, right? It's base, bonus, equity, right? Those are the ones. But I love that you put this, like remote work, internet reverse, in home office. It's so big right now. A lot of companies are putting together a home office package, whether it's under a benefit card, or whether it's a particular bonus, or if it's something that you have to expense on even your cell phone, whether you can expense it or not. Sometimes all of that stuff is considered expense. You're able to expense. If not, you could also talk to your accountant. There are ways that you can write some of that stuff off if you have the proper home office criteria. Most companies, and I don't know a lot about how remote work is what it's being offered now for some of those home offices. What I've seen and heard from some of the other recruiters is that they are helping out with new computers, monitors, stand-up desks. I mean, they're doing really everything they can to accommodate the home and remote office worker, or even a combo of that. There's also one thing that I didn't see on here that's something to think about and look at is education reimbursement. And that goes for online courses. So think about that. It's pretty huge when you think about some of the online courses that you can take through some pretty well-known institutions, and all of that could also be like education reimbursement at some of the bigger companies that offer it. So I definitely think to look into that, and it is something that they might be able to increase. So some companies say it's $1,000 a year, $5,000 a year. It's one of these like little tiny areas you might be able to dig into if that means something to you.
Absolutely. And then Matthew, I see your question here of new hire kits. I think just about every company now will give you your choice of computer. Some will give them monitors, and occasionally you'll get a phone if the job requires it. Very normal. And you just get them. And it's very, very, very normal, because they want you to be able to work from wherever.
And tech companies are all about onboarding and the people operations and the onboarding experience and what it's like to be your candidate or your employee onboarding experience. So oftentimes the bigger companies will give you all kinds of swag too, because they want you to be their walking billboards. But if you don't see an onboarding kit, or you don't see these types of even a cup, or even a offer to reimburse, I would take a look at that type of a company. And is that something that you want to work for? Because there may be, that may be indicative of what it's going to be like to work there.
Yeah, or ask, like complete honesty. I mean, when it comes to like clarifying the compensation package
Yeah.
is highly encouraged. In fact, that goes into like the negotiation, which I think is the next slide. How I approach some of them is I ask for clarity about things that I want. So if they didn't mention equity, I'm like, oh, do you offer an equity package and what's your 401k matching plan? Because maybe they weren't going to offer it, but now I asked, so they'll come back with something. But while we're on this topic, I do want to cover, we present this as a compensation package because this is where a meat of the negotiation comes in. We'll go into it on the next slide, but these are levers that you can pull. And you're like, oh, hey, it's like I'm more interested in remote work than I am maybe like signing bonus. And so it's like you're willing to pull this lever to say that I want to maybe forego this to get this. And that's how the negotiation really works. Is
Right.
It's the give and take, but we'll get into that right here. The negotiation. First of all, rule number one: does it meet your budget? That's the very first question. And if it doesn't, then you're gonna have to have a hard conversation right then and there. Like, is this worth me pursuing? You
Yeah.
don't necessarily want to get into a negotiation if you know it's not going to be meant for you. And then Laura, exactly to your point, have the conversation early, know the range. And if it's
Right.
not in your range and they can't meet you where you need to be, and you're like, this is great, but it's not actually what I'm looking for right now. Thank you so much. And you walk, and that's perfectly acceptable.
Right.
But
Go ahead.
no, I'm done.
Oh, no. I was going to say, I said early on that you only have one opportunity to negotiate. And the truth is you have two. In the initial conversation, when you set the expectations of what your salary expectations are, and you ask about that range and those budgeted for the salary or salary bands, whatever they want to call it, that's your first opportunity to negotiate right there. You're already setting that. And then this would be the second opportunity to negotiate. But what I do mean when I say you have one shot, you need to have all of those levers together. You need to have asked all of the questions, medical, dental, vision, 401k, 401k match, education reimbursement, home office expenses, whatever it is that you have thought about, and they've already disclosed what they can. And most of the time they'll tell you what's not. Oftentimes like PTO could be like a hard set for certain companies, right? So some recruiters will tell you like that's just like a hard no on some of these things, but come in with all of it. So having what your ask is, and a well thought out. Also, not just I'm asking to ask. I'm asking because this is why. After I talked with 4 other people within the company, I realized the scope of this work is a lot different, right? And I don't think it's been budgeted correctly, or I'm going to be taking on this other piece that we weren't aware of, or sometimes those job descriptions change within the conversations you have in the interview. So make sure you also have the why. Look, I'm going to be leaving, money on the table and I don't want to leave it on the table. Is there any way that you can meet me halfway? Maybe that's with a sign-on bonus. One caveat, and I didn't see it on any of the slides, sign-on bonuses in almost every state are taxed at a different tax bracket, usually between 45 to 47%. So if somebody says you're going to get a $5,000 sign-on bonus, don't expect to get more than $2,700. It's FYI. And it usually comes after your second paycheck. So just heads up on those when we're like, oh, we can get a sign-on bonus. And you're like, well, I'm going to get 25 grand. You're like, no, you're not. You're not, and you're not going to get it right away either. Some companies will even offer your a sign-on bonus as a relocation package and just help you with your moving expenses. And that's always nice because that actually works out better because you don't have to pay taxes on that. So they're something to think about when you do sign-on bonuses. It can get tricky, and you may want to talk to your accountant or family member or somebody else.
Go ahead.
So the one of the things that I do is coming up with your, the ask, right? Your base, your bonus, your equity, your PTO, the match, whatever it is. And then I like to lay out the counter with 3 offers. and I put one together. So it's a, it's a 100,000 with a 20% bonus and, 10,000 in equity, and 110,000, with a maybe it's a 20% bonus with 30 in equity, etc. One of them might even say, and also another title. So I don't want to be a manager, I want to be a senior manager. Maybe I kind of throw that one in. And the reason that I do 3 counter offers, one, we want to play with the power of 3, just because our reptilian brains love the power of 3. But one of them you will throw out because it's like going to be ridiculous, right? Like they're like, there's no way we can do that. Sorry. So now you only have 2, and make sure that those 2 counter offers that you've laid out are going to be your yes package. Yes, I would like. One is, God, I would really love this. The second one is like, yeah, you know what? I would totally take it. It's reasonable. The third is like, there is no way they're going to go for this, but I'm going to throw it in there anyway, right? Because you want to take one of those 3 off the table, and then you only have the 2 to play with. It just psychologically, it gives them this power back, that they're taking control back, and they're making these decisions for you. They're like, oh, well, we're going to decide, when really it's kind of, I call it no choice with a smile, right? So you're already just kind of giving them those 2. The other thing that I didn't see on here, and we can talk about it, is when we do counter offers, let's say it was 100,000, 110, and 120, we want to come in at 102.5. We want to come in at 112.8. We want to come in, and the reason being is they will always always round down, and we want them to round down to a number we want, right? And if we give them, if we don't give them whole numbers, there's like, oh, there's a reason behind these numbers. This person's really thought about these numbers, is very serious about these numbers, right? We've really thought about it. But really, this is just kind of a negotiation tactic to kind of it seems like we're putting the ball back in their court. But again, it's my kind of no choice with the smile. And then those are your levers, right? If they're going to come back, most of the time, this should all happen like verbally, right? And we should be talking about what we can sacrifice, or what we're going to compromise on in those levers that are, a handful of them, and every company is going to be different.
Yeah. And what I like to add to that, my specific approach is you just hit them hard with research and experience. If they give you an offer, if you don't want to go with like the 3 offer counter, you can just say, it's like, hey, I did my research. I see that for this role in this area, based on the number of years experience, like, it's like you offered 100. It's like, but I'm seeing on there, it's like, this is actually around 120.
Right.
Based off of like this comp, this comp, this comp. You're almost playing like real estate to a certain degree of figuring out the value of your role. You're like, and this is where I come with, and then you just sell it. You're
right.
Like,
And
from military background, I have this experience. This is what made me unique. At this point, they picked you, and they picked you for a reason, and they want you.
That's right.
So just sell it and see what they do. But Laura,
I was just going to say similar to that, but instead of like, I've done my research, I did the market rate, but also the other companies that I've been talking to and I've interviewed with recently have been offering this, and this, right? Because these companies that I've talked to, whether it worked out or not, none of it doesn't work. Doesn't matter, right? I've been talking to quite a few other companies. Specifically, one was at 128 and the other one was at 125. Now, they didn't have a lot of the other benefits that you did. So can we talk about that? So even giving them, even letting them know, the market that you've seen with other companies you've been talking to.
Yeah, you're selling exclusivity, or not exclusivity, but that they may lose you is what you're giving the impression of. Like, hey, I'm talking to people, hot commodity. So it's always a good technique. And then I just did want to say, like, general pointers, just keep in mind down the right. Just some really big ones I want to point out, and I see some really good questions in the chat. Keep your numbers as clear as possible in written communications. That way, because something that's said of verbal can be misinterpreted or forgotten to be perfectly honest. Some people may forget what they said. Recruiters talk to a lot of people during the day. So if you can get it in writing in one way, shape, or form, that really helps. And it's not necessarily the like pin it to them in case they make a mistake. It's like, no, this is very easy because now I can remember it, you can remember it, and we know this is what we talked about. Again, you're being very kind, you're working on a problem together, and that's usually the best approach. Those are two the big ones that I wanted to pick out. But I did have a question. Sorry, I can't remember who mentioned it. To you, Laura, of what would you say is an unreasonable or an excessive or ridiculous offer? Like, when is it too ridiculous? Like, is it like, I want a $500,000 a year, a free,
Yeah.
and
I mean, don't make it too ridiculous, but if it's something like, hey, this is a manager position, we're offering it at 100, the bonus is 20%, and there's no wiggle room on that bonus. That's what it is for manager level. Then you could say, you know what, is there any way that we can get like a senior manager level on this? And I'm willing to not have to change the base, but I'm willing, they're like, yeah, we can't do that because there's somebody sitting in that seat, whatever, right? There's already a senior manager there. You could, you could throw that in there, or you can say something like, I get it, I understand. Is there any way we can do like a $25,000 sign-on bonus? They're like, absolutely not. Like, but that's got to be one of the three, right? You have to do it in three. You can't throw out something ridiculous unless you have two other things to fall back on that you would say yes to. Right? That you would say yes to, because you can't go back and then try to renegotiate 1 and 2. You've already laid it out for them.
Yep. And then another question, Sophie, you had a really good point, and I've heard this a bunch, and I actually haven't thought about it. She asks if they offer a lower salary because you need to learn the ropes, you're breaking into the industry. How do you go about asking for maybe a salary renegotiation at a shorter time period than the 1 year mark? Because that's typically when they offer.
Yeah, that comes up a lot. And it's something that it's an ask, definitely. Like, hey, I know that I need to learn the ropes. I know that I'm new to this industry. And that could be part of the negotiation. Is there anywhere that we could, talk about this in 6 months or address this in 6 months? And if so, you want to make sure that you get that in writing as well. Because that will actually give you, even if you pulled it in sooner, you have it in writing that they might be able to reevaluate your base salary or package at 6 months. But in that 6 months, you're going to show them and demonstrate to them that you are worth it. So it shouldn't be like, oh no, we have to wait for a year. But I do always think that I don't know. Oftentimes they don't have the power to readjust your salary in 6 months. So their hands are tied a little bit too. So it's like, oh yeah, well, we can talk about it, but I might not be able to do anything about it. So there's a difference there, and I would want some clarity around that. If it is in 6 months, what would it be, right?
And then Javon, for how do you get that in writing? You'll get a contract that you have to sign. And they'll sign it, you'll sign it, and it should have a bullet in there that specifically says that. And the last thing I want to leave for the negotiation, this is just my little thing that I like to do, but it's always kind of fun and it gets you something out of it, is when I know that I've mostly gotten what I'm looking for, the last thing I ask for is very small. Just to, like, you're going to get something else out of it. And it kind of just brings a lot of levity to the situation, because salary negotiations can be a little stressful. So sometimes I recommend people, it's like, hey, just ask for the bus pass. If you're in a big city, if you're in San Francisco, that's huge. And it's not a huge expense for them necessarily. I think with one company, I'm like, hey, throw in a hoodie and we'll call it. Just something very small is like this olive branch to extend. It's like, yeah, you've been great. I just need this one tiny more thing and I'm perfectly happy. It usually leaves a smile on their face. Yes, Desiree, and the free taco could work just as well, or buy me lunch. That's kind of fun. It just sets a good tone, because you have to understand that after negotiation, you're working with these people. So if you kind of do like, yeah, this was great, thank you so much for doing this with me.
And if you really wanted to change it around, like, you can say, thank you so much. Now, when can I, one more thing, like, when can we sit down and when can I buy you lunch? You've been amazing, right? That would be huge as well. But here's the other thing about going in for a lower salary and getting it in writing, that that they would reevaluate your salary within 6 months or a shorter amount of time. What if that person that signed that contract is no longer with the company? And other people haven't seen your performance, so they can't attest to whether or not you're worthy of it. So just something to think about in that, who's going to keep track of that, and then how do you fight for that? How can you advocate for yourself if that person isn't there? So.
Absolutely. Sorry. The next slide, we're getting close to the end here, so I'll open it up. Extra bonus points if you can tell me who that person is. Very obscure reference. But some of the etiquette that we have for some of these, or the salary negotiation. I'm just going to list 3 of the big ones to cover. Of when you receive an offer, the first words out of your mouth as quickly as you possibly can send them or on the phone is "thank you." Oh, Jose, yes, Miss Emily Post, very well done. She wrote the books on etiquette, literally. Yeah, the first thing you need to do is you've got to get that message out. Thank you so much for this offer. It has been great working with you. And then you ask very quickly, can I have, and normally 24 hours is the good number. I don't say any more than 72, but can I have 24 hours to talk this over with my family? I don't care if your family is your spouse, your parents, your kids, your cat, or your imaginary friend. You have a family now, because you need to talk it over with them. It gives you a very quick and easy way for you to think about it, because we don't want you to just say, oh, that's amazing, yes. You want to take your time, think about it, look it through. The offer letters are sometimes very complicated and very complex, and they'll give you a benefits package, and that is also another thing to just find your way through. But yeah, ask to take that time. If you have a specific situation that's going to need like a week, be willing to share what that situation is, but usually 72 hours is about the maximum, because recruiters have a lot of work to do and you're at the final phases. The other one, actually, Laura, I kind of want to get your take on this, because this was a really good one that we went in depth on. What if you have other interviews in progress? How do you manage that?
Yeah, I mean, I think honesty is what's important, right? And so, letting other companies like you have here know that hey, I'm interviewing with some other companies right now, or I'm interviewing with, whatever, I'm in late stage interviews with this other company. I'm in early stage interviews with this company and already have some scheduled interviews. You could say something, I'd love to consider your offer, but I've already gone this far with these other companies, and I really need to make an educated, decision for myself and for my family. And I need to kind of give them the courtesy as well. They've went out of their way. Thank you so much. I promise I will get back to you as soon as I can. Right? It's really that kind of that grace, and being really respectful and being graceful, and letting them know, this is a big decision, and I don't want to take it lightly, and I don't want to say yes right away. Don't get me wrong. You're my number one. You are my number one. And I do want to say yes to you, but I also want to make sure that I have done my due diligence, or I have, gone through the process. These companies were kind enough to bring me this far along. Anything like that would buy you a little bit more time, as long as you kind of are ridiculously honest and thankful. Yeah. Yes. Overly thankful. Keep the doors open. Yeah.
And then
the decline. Oh yeah, the declining the offer. Yeah, at this time. I love that. At this time, because you never know, right? You want to keep that door open. When we say at this time to start off a sentence, we could always say, like I said, just at this moment in time. I wasn't saying like a forever thing, right? It's what's best for me and my family. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. If I think of anyone, I will definitely refer them your direction. But at this time, I can't go that direct. I can't. For me and my family, I have to do what's best, right?
And then I want to step back here real quick. I can't remember if you mentioned it, but when you do have an offer in hand, you are in a really cool spot. because now you go to everybody else that you were along in that interview pipeline with, and you say, I just want to let you know I have received an offer from another company. Where are we at in this interview cycle? And is there any way that we could expedite it because I'm still interested in this role?
Yeah.
Now they are on your schedule, and you can bet they're going to bring a little bit of a better offer to the table if they really want you.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be, and then that's where it comes to declining, and you're going to have to tell somebody no. And you're like, hey, I had several competitive offers. Yours was definitely on my short list. Unfortunately, I had to make the decision that was best for me and my family at this time. But I'm willing to give you a referral, or I'll definitely be in touch in the future, which opens up another idea too of stay connected with your recruiter. They like to change companies. And sometimes they go where you are, where you would like to go, and you have that information. Awesome. Anything else to add, Laura, before we open it up for questions? I have tons.
Yeah, no, open it up for questions, because we have we're good, because I think you have a lot of talk tracks in the takeaway of this, so I think we'll be okay.
Awesome. One of the questions that came in, and sorry I didn't copy down the name, so feel free to speak up if this is yours. Somebody's working directly with a VP for negotiation. Does that change anything versus working with a recruiter?
No. The VP is the one that set the budget. The recruiter is just the person that's delivering the information, but it comes out of the VP's budget. So if the VP is doing direct negotiations, as long as they're transparent with their, people operations or human resource team, then I mean, even better, right? You kind of want to negotiate with the VP and not the recruiter, because then you don't have the middleman. It's like plugging something into an adapter to plug into another adapter. Like, it just kind of takes that middleman out, right?
For the Apple users that can relate.
Right.
Good. Yeah, it's coming out of their budget. It's really, the recruiter is just the messenger because the VP is very busy. So if you're in talks with the VP, awesome. It's just a short decision cycle. Matthew, I'll have you ask your question.
So first of all, thanks for coming by, learning a lot. I have a question for, one of those odd circumstances. What happens if you accept an offer and either at the finalizing stages, or, just, I don't know, within a month or two into the position, the company, I don't know, goes through a big downsizing and you want to, hush back with those people that you had other offers with, how would you go about doing that? So basically, how do you go about reestablishing a connection after you've denied, some offers?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question, and a real live problem, right? That's a real life problem. I think it's the same way that we've talked about with, with dignity and grace. Hey, I'm sorry I wasn't able to accept your offer at that time. I ended up taking another offer, and this company is unwinding, and I just wanted to see if that position was still open or if there were other opportunities within the organization. I just wanted to let you know I'm going to be on the market again, right? And kind of throw it back at them. I'm going to be on the market again. I wasn't expecting this to happen. I'm so sorry I had to decline before, but I'm happy to have discussions if the opportunity is still open, something like that.
They fell in love once, so
yeah,
right. Again. Right. And then, Sophie, I wanted to get back to your follow-up question that I missed. I remember we were talking about like the reevaluation of 6 months, and the question was, could that backfire and they lower my pay? I always love this question because it's such a simple answer.
Yeah, no, no, they can't lower your pay arbitrarily. I don't even know if that's legal in most states. There's got to be like they've got to put you like on a performance improvement program, or it's not like the military where you can get demoted and you can get a lower pay. They either just ask you to leave and you got to go get another job, or they put you on some kind of what we call a PIP, or performance improvement plan. I've never seen people's pay decrease because of that. And that goes with the question that people are always afraid. They're afraid, if I negotiate, will my offer be rescinded? People ask me that all the time. They're so afraid. Oh my gosh, if I negotiate, they're just going to just say, no, this person is just so greedy. And I don't want to have this person around. They will not. I mean, it does happen. It is a rare thing that happens. But in my 23 years of recruiting, I've seen an offer rescinded one time, and that person kept coming back and asking for more and more and more. Finally, I was like, we're done. Like, if this is indicative of how you're going to be constantly in the work environment, I don't think this is going to be the right cultural fit, period. So all companies expect you to negotiate, and they will not rescind their offer. Again, every time I say that, one person's like, they rescinded my offer. There's always going to be one time, right? But I mean, it's 99.9% of the time they won't. They're offering you and expecting you to negotiate.
Yeah, and if they do come back and rescind it and you haven't been overly pushy with them, run from that company fast.
Yeah.
They do not value you or your time. Let's see. Matthew, I see you had another one, but I want to get to Matthew Price of your question about how to negotiate an offer that is built for you and you don't necessarily have comps. Anything you want to add to that, Matthew? Or did I summarize it for you pretty well?
No, so essentially, yeah, they're creating a position for me and there is no market research to kind of base it off of. And so I really don't know what to counter with because I have nothing to base it on.
I mean, then your guess is as good as mine. I don't have anything. If you don't have any, I mean, what would be a comparable position? So if you took this position, like what is the position?
So it's a manager transformation portfolio execution. That's what they call it.
That's not a title. But if we took and tell them that, but if you were a portfolio, like, what industry?
It's in global supply chain.
Global supply chain. So I would look at different types of global supply chain roles and match it to the best of that manager level, but really look at the scope of work. So sometimes manager, depending on company size, it could be senior manager, director, manager level. Based off of your scope of work, you can normally tell by years of experience and or of that portfolio. Are you only dealing with certain products or certain services, or are they giving you everything? So depending on what that is, I would be looking at global supply chain type roles and see what you could find that's comparable, and lose the rest of to me, the portfolio means you're just going to have a lot of stuff to do, right? You're going to be responsible and ownership for a lot of things. So looking at scope is where I would try to give them here's what I see in the retail, here's what I see in CPG, here's what I see in whatever, right? Other companies. And this is kind of what from the base of the work and the responsibility and scope of work, this is what numbers I'm putting together.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
10% is always a fair one to aim a little high as well if you're just looking for somewhere to start. But I wanted to get back to Matthew Perez. I still see you. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to go back through the old questions of who should make the first offer?
That's always the one, right? I watch this one all the time. Salary negotiations. Salary negotiations. They always say, if you're not the first one, you're done. You're done. You're out. You've lost already, right? It's a standoff. Don't be the first one. Maybe when it comes to you playing poker, maybe when it comes to you selling something, or maybe for me, this is your life. This is your livelihood. This is the roof over your head and the food that you put in your mouth. Be upfront and honest and transparent about what you need. Obviously, like I said, pad what you need in that overhead number. But I don't think there's anything wrong with coming out of the gate and saying, this is what my value is. I know what I'm value, the value that I can provide. And this is what I know about what I do and how much it really pays within the market. And I think it's really important that we have to realize this is about us. and we're only going to be advocating for us. At the end of the day, if like what Matthew, if the company it just, you know, is going to go under or fold or pull budget, they don't care about you, sadly. I mean, you guys all seem like great people, but at the end of the day, they don't. It's just business, right? It's just business. If they lose budget, or, you know, all of a sudden their board of directors said that they're closing this company down or whatever, you know, that's it. You're done. So you have to be honest. To me, you have to be honest and advocate for yourself. So I don't think it matters who throws it out there. I definitely think asking what's this position, but what's the budget for this position? Especially if it's a people manager, am I going to have budget to hire other people? What does that look like? Right. So knowing what you're worth coming into the conversation is really important. So whether or not, you know, you blinked first, it doesn't matter.
And then my take, Laura and I talked about this last week, I actually like making the first offer. Because if you think about it, your offer you're probably gonna make is probably gonna be a little bit higher than theirs. So if you make the first offer and it's above, they are more likely to not give you their minimum because they want to meet you closer to where you are. Where if they make the first offer, it's going to be towards the bottom of their range. Again, you're going to have the research ready to know roughly where that range is, but it actually does slightly work in your favor if you do make the first one. Most interviews now, they tell you on the first interview, like, hey, the range for this is, or the range for this role is this. Is that going to work for you? Just because they don't want to waste their time either. But Matthew Press, you've been waiting for a while. Go ahead.
No worries. Fun cultural tip though about like making an offer first. It's not even an offer, but the first person to talk about business. If you're doing negotiations or business meetings in Japan, the first person to talk about business, even if there's an awkward silence, comes in from a lower position of power. So if you ever want to have fun with those cultural power dynamics, there's a fun tip. But then, my question was, do any of these change when it comes to negotiating within your company? So you're going for a promotion, or let's say your responsibilities have changed, but you're still getting, you know, for probably more senior, maybe not even directly above your initial responsibilities. So how does this change, and how would you go about it? Would you even go about it, or try to move to another company?
Yeah, 100% try. You don't know. And coaching tip to add on to what you said, Matthew, is we call it in coaching, we call it let the silence do the heavy lifting, right? So if you come to a meeting and everyone's silent and that first person is the lower power, you kind of just like sit back and just let it ride. But I do think, you know, if you like your company and they're just, you know, you feel like based off of the scope of work, it's changed as you've grown within the organization or you've taken on more responsibilities, you know, it's definitely something that you can renegotiate and ask. And I would start with your immediate supervisor before you like roped like human resources in or something like that, that can help out and understand. Oftentimes, you know, we end up taking on more work because we want to raise our hand and learn different things. And, you know, we want to have a stretch assignment so that we can learn more. Sometimes that's compensation enough because we learned something we never would have had the opportunity to. I do think it's important to start where they know you before you leave the company and go somewhere else. And you know, see what else they can give you. If it's not a compensation promotion, can you get the corner office or, right, or something else that we kind of put up there, right? Can you get a bonus? Can you get, you know, the next 4 Fridays off for the summer? Is there something else that you could get creative about?
Thank you.
Thank you. We are a little bit over time, Laura, if you're willing to stay around, that's great. If not, then let me know when you have to leave.